You are expected to be familiar with three common trig functions and their graphs: sine, cosine and tangent. You'll also be required to know the trig values of some common angles that arise. Let's look at the graphs first. So this graph is the graph for the sine function, often abbreviated to just SIN, but it's definitely said sine. What you can see is the graph of sine gives you a repeated pattern. In fact, what you'll notice is that this pattern repeats every 360 degrees, and this is known as the period of the graph. Other things to notice on this graph is that the maximum value that sine can ever take is 1, and the minimum value it can take is -1. This is the graph of cosine, commonly abbreviated to just COS. We can see that, like the sine graph, this is a repeating pattern. Again, if you look carefully, you can see that the period that it takes to repeat the cycle, the pattern, is 360 degrees again. Also notice that the maximum is still 1 and the minimum is -1. Here's the graph of tangent, usually abbreviated with these three letters, tan. You can see that we've got a repeating pattern again, but it's quite a different pattern to the last two that we've seen, because you'll notice that every now and again it goes zooming off to infinity and beyond, and actually this graph is not joined up, it's not continuous in that way. So that's a big difference. So if we're looking at how long it takes to repeat a pattern, so here goes to here, the next time it does that is there, so we can see that this has got a much shorter period. It's only got a period of 180 degrees there. And as I've already mentioned, although I haven't got room to show it, it goes up as far as infinity and down as far as -infinity. So in effect, it doesn't have any limits in the vertical sense. And as we've seen here, it never hits these points here. So if you type in tan of 90 degrees, you'll get maths error, because there's no such value. That yellow line I've just drawn in has a special name. It's called an asymptote, but I don't think you're expected to know those terms. And you can see that there's several of those as we go along. So I mentioned that you are also expected to know and remember key values for sine, cosine and tan. These are the angles that they expect you to know. And along with sort of recognizing those graphs, that will help you with at least a couple of these, but the others you will just need to memorize. So if we just quickly jump back to the sine graph, you can see that when it's 0 degrees here, then sine is 0. When it's 90 degrees here, sine is at its maximum and it's 1. So let's fill those ones in on the diagrams. When the angle is 0 degrees, sine is 0. And when the angle is 90, it's 1. We've got three other values that we need to know about. I'm just going to tell you them. You just need to go away and memorize them. So sine of 30 degrees is a half. Sine of 45 degrees is 1/√2. Or a different way of writing 1/√2 is √2/2. So you can choose which of those two versions you want to memorize. And then the sine of 60 is √3/2. So now let's have a look at cos. We go back to the cos graph. So when the angle is 0, cos is 1. And when the angle is 90, cos is 0. So we'll pop those in. Now I'll add in those other values. what you can see is there's a crossover with the sine. So sine of 30 is the same as cos of 60 and vice versa. So let's have a look now at tan. When the angle is 0, tan is 0, and as we discussed earlier, when the angle is 90, there is no value for tan. It gets off the charts. 0 here, and it's a maths error if you try and put it into the calculator here. So what values does it take at 30, 45 and 60? At 30, it's 1 over root 3, or again another version of that is root 3 over 3, whichever one you prefer to memorize. 45 degrees tan is 1, and at 60 degrees tan is root 3. So just some values that you need to get familiar with and memorize.